We are live. It's the Revved Up 906 podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast to be exact. And I'm Hudson.
And I'm Ryan.
And before we get into episode number 11 of season 3, you all know the deal. I got to talk to you about a few quick things. First off, if you like today's episode, make sure to like and subscribe. And we're going to be talking about All-Star Weekend. So if you have questions, comments, concerns, make sure to comment below. We'd love to know what you guys have to say. We love talking back and forth in the comments. And then maybe if it's something important, we can talk about it next week. We would just love if you comment below. And then if you like today's episode, make sure to hit the share button right below this video. It looks like an arrow button. You can share us on Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat. That just helps the podcast grow so we can make a big splash in the Detroit Pistons community. We'd greatly appreciate if you guys shared us, whether it's your Snapchat story, Instagram story, or your Facebook feed. We would just absolutely appreciate that. And just thank you for watching today's episode. We hope you enjoy it. And Ryan, I'm excited for this week's topic because everybody always every year looks forward to All-Star Weekend. And no matter if the format changes from East versus West to tournament style, it's always got a fun feeling to it, whether it's the dunk contest with Mac McClung or Cade's first appearance in a 3-point contest and his first appearance in an All-Star game. It's always kind of fun when a Pistons player participates in All-Star Weekend. So we just want to take some time to recap Cade and Ausar Thompson's All-Star Weekend. And I know what some people are thinking if they watched every event, that it didn't go in their favor as much as we probably hoped. It'd have been amazing if Cade put up, 15 points in one of the games, or if Ausar Thompson, blocked amen or just had a crazy block on the player. It'd just be fun to see, but it didn't go exactly to plan. But it's always fun getting to see your players play. And we're going to start with Ausar Thompson's Rising Stars game. His team ended up losing 40-39 in the semifinal. What hurts is in that case is Ausar missed all 4 free throw attempts late in the game, but he had an impressive dunk and just did what Ausar always did, which is a lot of effort. Ryan, as far as talking about Ausar Thompson in the Rising Stars game, give some opinions on that, but then also it's great just to know that there's a guy like Ausar Thompson representing Detroit and kind of being just a tough player that gets big time dunks and blocks. It's good just knowing that he was there to represent Detroit.
Yeah. So to me, All-Star Weekend was a success if you're looking at it from a Pistons standpoint. Not just because of Cade Cunningham, of course, but because you had Ausar Thompson still. And honestly, I think there should have been more guys in the All-Star Weekend from the Pistons than what there was. Because you look at even, honestly, if Jaden Ivey doesn't go out with broken fibia there, or tibia, whatever it may be, I can't think off the top of my head right now, but Jaden Ivey doesn't go out, he would have probably have been an All-Star this year. It would have been like maybe a small little shimmy of a doubt, maybe that it would have been like most likely.
Yeah.
But there would have been a chance that he could have been an All-Star this year. You go down the list, Jalen Duren. If honestly, the last couple month or so of games, if he would have been playing like that from the start till now, he would have been an All-Star. And honestly, Malik Beasley should have been in the 3-point contest. And he did talk about that. He said, it always starts where whoever's in All-Star Weekend already as an All-Star, they get the top spots for those contests, and then it just trickles down. So I would have been the next up, but I felt as if Cade should have taken that spot because he's a star. I'm not, so I'm going to let him go do his thing, and that's why he wasn't in it. But with that being said, Ausar Thompson representing us in the Rising Stars was great to see, because not only does it give us a little bit of hope from a Pistons standpoint, because I mean, realistically, we really haven't had a rising star since Cade Cunningham or Jaden Ivey last year, or a couple of years ago or so. So it's been a while since we've had a guy in the Rising Stars game. So seeing Ausar out there, it was great. The one dunk that he had, my goodness, we've seen it
Yeah,
happen before, but like he
it was
quite
nice.
literally was way outside the paint and he just soared and got the finish. But so yeah, so overall, I'd say it's a success that we had two Pistons representing us this year because it's been a while. And honestly, it's been a while since we've had even an all-star. Last time was Blake Griffin. And to me personally, that is very sad because Blake Griffin really wasn't even that spectacular for the Pistons. Now, obviously, he had great stats here and there. But to me, in order to have like a great stint with the team, you got to do something for us. And what did he do? He did nothing because he leaves and he complains and says that the Pistons suck and Detroit sucks. So clearly he didn't like it here and he didn't do anything. That's not the point. Ausar Thompson, the way he played in that game, it showed that there is an element of Trajan Langdon, JB Bickerstaff, the whole gang knows what they're doing and has more so an opportunity this year than not to really establish themselves as an up and coming team, which we haven't seen that in a while. But Ausar Thompson in that game, outside of the dunk, of course, which is awesome, he had a solid night. Um, Obviously, they didn't make it through to the championship and then even to making it all the way to play on All-Star weekend and in regards to the actual All-Star game. Um,
Okay.
but that's because of the four missed free throws at the end. Something we're going to talk about here because that
Brutal.
I was watching it and I'm like sitting there going like, okay, we have a shot. Ausar Thompson to the next round. Let's see what he
Yeah.
can do. He gets to the line
Yeah.
the first time. He misses the first one. I'm like, okay, he'll shake that off. He'll make the next one. And
Hmm.
then he misses. I'm like, oh no, this is not good. They go
Yeah.
back down the other team on the possession and they convert, and then we go back down the other way, get fouled, and it starts back in the line again. I'm like, okay, there's no way he misses two more free throws in a row. And what does he do? He misses four free throws in a row. And then
Yeah.
the next play, boom, game over. So, like, he missed four free throws that were clutch free throws with the game on the line, essentially. He makes those four. Honestly, he makes three of those four they're on to the next round. And honestly, if it makes two, it makes it harder for the other team to go down and win that game like that. So
Right.
he needs to hit clutch free throws, apparently, because I mean, you can't go two trips to the line and miss four free throws in a row. That is
Yeah.
terrible. But I mean, granted, his free throw percentage isn't great this year, but still, you got to make those four. Like this is,
Got to knock him
and
down.
in terms of pressure, you think of an actual game, that's different. This is something fun, so there shouldn't really be any pressure. But yeah, so that was frustrating to me because I'm sitting there going like, "Ausar, you just lost, and now I don't get to watch you play anymore. What the
I
heck?"
know. Yeah,
Um,
agreed.
but outside of that, I mean, four missed free throws, terrible. But I mean, it happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know what to expect going into a Rising Stars game. He probably didn't think he was going to have to be knocking down some clutch free throws to try to get to the finals. Um, and he's just not really in that role for the Pistons. Like he probably wouldn't be taking those free throws at the end of a game. I guess maybe I could be wrong, but most teams are going to be following the big men. But it just hurts to hear that and to see that and just be like, oh, he had a shot to win it. But we'll talk more about Ausar and Amen Thompson as we get closer to the end of the podcast. But next, we're going to talk about Cade's first appearance in the 3-point contest. And I know for me, it kind of came as a shock. I would have thought Malik Beasley had a better shot at the 3-point contest than Cade, but obviously, Cade can hold his own around the 3-point line. And he had a fine score. He had 16 points, did not advance to the second round. It was actually funny. I was watching the 3-point contest and he was the third to go up. And I had made a bet for Cade Cunningham to have the most consecutive 3-pointers made in the first round. And I can't remember the two first guys that went, but their longest streak was 3. And so Cade only had to beat 3 3-pointers in a row for my bet to hit. And he never got it, though he did tie it later in his round the 3-point line because he started off super slow, then went a little hot. And Tyler Hero went on to win it with a score of 24, I believe. Do you know that? Is that confirmed, Ryan, or was it 23?
Yeah, it was somewhere around there, 24, 23.
Yeah, I believe it was 24. And I believe Damian Lillard had 23. But I actually made a bet for Tyler Hero to win it because I remembered back to when the Pistons played the Heat, and I believe maybe December when Tyler Hero made like 5 threes in 30 seconds. It was absolutely nuts. The craziest thing I've ever seen. And the Heat would go on to win that game. And I'm like, if Tyler Hero gets hot, he may win this thing. And that's exactly what happened. Just had the edge to win it. And so that was a pretty nice bet to hit. That's all I got to say. But Ryan, any thoughts on Cade Cunningham's 3-point contest? It was obviously a little streaky, but representation is always great.
Hey, representation is always great. But apparently he needs to work on his 3-point shot a little bit more. And I don't think it's necessarily that.
Yeah.
In the fact that contest is actually pretty hard. Because
scary. It'd be so
it's
scary.
It's really scary. And honestly, man, you're shooting the ball in a completely different way than what you normally would shoot it. Because you're trying to think of how much time I take on this shot, how quick my release has to be, and just like all the nicks and knacks behind it. Whereas you think of like an in game, you're either pulling up or you're catching and shooting. That's it. You don't really think about it. You just do it. Whereas the 3-point contest, you're having to make sure you grab the ball, shoot it, grab the ball, shoot it, grab the ball, shoot it. Like it's just a whole cycle. And then you have the starry balls, which are the 4-point shots that are even deeper. So you're having to run around each rack of balls, shoot your shot, grab the next ball, shoot. It's just a whole process. And then they have to think about, okay, where do I put my money ball rack? Where do I place it on the court? And it's just a lot, really. But yeah, so.
And with the 3-point contest specifically, the catch and shoot players do better because they pull it from their side and go up just like they're catching it in a pass. Cade Cunningham always finds the shot himself. So that's why I think Malik Beasley could have possibly won this thing, even though Cade was a great participant. But that was just one of my thoughts was Cade's always stepping into his shot or taking a step back, pulling up, or getting off the pick and roll and fading to the back and knocking down that 3. So it's kind of different than the way Cade scores his 3s in a game.
Yeah, and Tyler Hero, no disrespect to him, because he can definitely create for himself. But more often than not, he's in a catch and shoot position versus pulling up and just taking his own shot. And then even Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield is a catch and shoot. He's not pulling up. He's not creating his own shot. He's catch and shoot. And honestly, majority of those guys are catch and shoot. Although Damian Lillard is more of a pull up than a catch and shoot, because obviously he's a point guard. But Cade is not that. We knew that going into it. We knew Cade's not going to win this. There's no way he wins this. But there's us as Pistons fans, just a little slimmer of hope going like, okay, I hope he wins. I hope he does good. But we knew it. I mean, the writing was on the wall before he even started that he was not going to win. And in fact, I was hoping that Jalen Brunson would have just crapped the bed compared to Cade, but he didn't, which is unfortunate. But we still own the Knicks because we are undefeated against them this season. But yeah, Cade, you got to work on that 3-point shot in terms of the 3-point contest a little bit more, get more of the timing and rhythm down. Maybe call up Steph Curry and be like, hey, I know you've won this a couple times, or even talk to Dame, be like, hey, I know you've won this a couple times. Like, can you give me any pointers? Because that 14 in the first round, not terrible, not as bad as Cam Johnson, because that was atrocious. But
brutal.
It wasn't that
bad for him.
I felt
bad for him. I think Paul Pierce is the only person that has hit every shot. I think he did it in the early 2000s. He literally didn't miss. I'm pretty sure. Maybe he missed a couple, but I thought he had a nearly perfect score, if not perfect. Just as a little side note. Yeah, it was just kind of brutal. And if we remember back a couple seasons ago, I don't know if it was last season or 2 seasons ago, Cade Cunningham participated in the skills challenge, and he put up a goose egg in that too. Like, he's just not great at the competitions. He's more in game. He's going to school you with backing you down in the paint, hitting the off rhythm mid shots. That's just what he does. He's not the best in these skill challenges, which is okay. We want him to show up in the real games when it comes down to record. That's what we really care about. We can move on to Cade Cunningham in the All-Star game. It was his first appearance. And Ryan, we've long awaited for his first All-Star game. And it just was great for him to finally get that nod, not just because of, him and getting that award, but really finally getting some national attention. And everyone seems to be talking about Cade right now and what Detroit is doing. And they're slowly making a name for themselves as a team that's going to be competing for many, many years. I watch Sports Center every single morning, and there's always a little piece on the Detroit Pistons. They are taking note, and all the commentators and announcers are just loving on them. They love what they're seeing. So I'm just happy that Cade was able to get this nod to the All-Star game, even though the format was a little weird with tournament style. I don't hate it, but it would have been nice just seeing him get more minutes. It's hard to spread the minutes out when they're games to 40. So I didn't love that, but it is what it is. We saw Cade get 5 points, 1 rebound. He hit a 3-pointer and then a highlight reel dunk. It wasn't quite on Victor Wembanyama, but Victor didn't even want the smoke really. But he played good, knocked down the shots when he needed to, made contributions. But he was on Kenny's Young Stars team, Kenny the Jet Smith, and they were eliminated in the semifinal round, much like Ausar Thompson. Ryan, any thoughts on Cade's first appearance as an All-Star?
Shout out to Jalen Rose. Love him dearly. As he put it, that Detroit basketball is more than a game, it's a movement.
Oh, and yeah, baby.
He made that post recently, and I'm like, dude, that was spot on. I completely agree with that statement. And he wanted to make note, like, Jimmy Walker was the last Pistons guard to be a #1 overall pick and an All-Star. And he was the first overall pick in 1967. So, like, it's been a while. Cade Cunningham, obviously, in 2021, being the #1 overall pick. But first All-Star as the first pick since Jimmy Walker. So it's been a minute since we've had a #1 pick in the All-Star game. So shout out to Cade, shout out to Jimmy Walker, shout out Jalen Rose, of course. Which I do appreciate how close he is with the Pistons and how close he wants to be on a daily basis. He never really played for the Pistons, but he's still a Detroit native. He's always going to support, and that's what that is. There should always be love around Pistons basketball. But yeah, I would agree. It's not just a game. It is a movement. And honestly, shout out Mason, announcer, because like you think about it, you think of Detroit basketball. Every single time you think of Detroit basketball, you think of Mason saying that. You don't think of like anything else. You think of Mason saying that. You think of you think of that. You think of the '04 Pistons with their starting lineup intros, like the final countdown, everything. You think of all those things. Yeah, there's just so much. It's a movement because you can't forget these things. Every casual sports fan out there, for the most part, knows exactly what everything that I just listed off is. Because Detroit basketball is a movement. It's not just a game. So Cade getting his first All-Star appearance, great. In terms of the tournament format, I would agree with you. I don't hate it, but I don't love it. And the only reason I say that is because the format, honestly, perfectly fine. But if you're going to do it that way, it's either you make the games longer or you give more games. And because tournament style, it's so hard to fit all those games into one night. And a common concern and a complaint really that the players gave out was that there was too much other things going on in between the games. And I completely agree with that because I'm perfectly fine with the fact that the NBA tried to make it more of an entertainment event versus a game event. But the
Right.
All-Star game should always be an All-Star game. It shouldn't be a couple All-Star games and a lot of main events. It should focus on the game itself. We're not
Mhm.
celebrating all these people from this area. We're celebrating basketball. We're celebrating the best players in the world all playing together, one on one, three on three, five on five, vice versa. Like it should always be on them as the priority. It should never be anything else. Is it cool that there are certain nods that they did this year with the Bay Area? Of course. I would love to see that. But do I want to see that on All Star night trying to watch LeBron James, Anthony Edwards, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Brunson? Like, am I trying to focus on them, or am I trying to focus on the entertainment side of things? I'm trying to focus on them. So, in terms of the format, they tried something new. Did it work? Sure. Did it suck? Yes. There's just it's a 50-50 really. A lot of
Yeah.
people that I've talked to have either loved it or hated it. It's a 50-50 right now. A lot of the players hate it, a lot of the fans love it. It's weird. So I think there definitely needs to be some changes of that still. I know Giannis threw out a Team USA versus Team World as the All-Star game, which could
Absolutely.
be fun. I think that could be
Yep.
really fun. But then the issue is, even as many European players or just world players as we have in our league currently, there is still a lot more American born players than world players. And so if you're going to go into that side of the thing, like there's going to be some random guy who happens to be an international player make the All-Star game, which typically they shouldn't make the All-Star game, make the All-Star game. Or then you're going to have, as a Team USA as an example, Cade might not have made it this year if you just did a Team USA. And so I think if you're going to do that, you have to break it down a little bit more. And maybe there has to be certain criteria with it. Because I think there's a lot of guys, American born players per se, that are really going to take a hard hit if it were to change to that format, just because we all know it's going to be the headline guys and that's it. And you're never going to see like Cade Cunningham getting a bid over Jalen Brunson as an example, which I think is absolutely absurd because Brunson, I love his story, great player, but he is severely overrated. And it's strictly just because he is a New York Knick. That is all that it is. When he was with Dallas, everybody could care less about Jalen Brunson. Goes to New York, everybody's like, oh my gosh, Jalen Brunson is an all-star. He is an MVP candidate, like everything. And I'm sitting there going
Yeah.
like, the dude was a second round pick. No disrespect. The dude was a second round pick. And obviously, a top tier player gets drafted in the first round. Not always the case, but more often than not. And then Dallas didn't even really want to re-sign him, so they let him walk. New York is like, well,
Well, that's
we have
Nico.
yeah, well, yeah,
That's a whole nother
but
thing.
still, he let him walk because he didn't think there was any value there whatsoever. Just like there's
Yeah.
no value in Luka Doncic apparently. Um, but the dad happens to be on the coaching staff for Thibodeau in New York. They bring him in, boom. But so yeah, the point is, Jalen Brunson, love your story, love your work ethic, love who you are, but I can't stand you because you are a New York Knick. But that being said, the format were to change, Brunson would make it over Cade because of popularity alone. And that's the sad thing. So I think there definitely needs to be some work around here and there with the format. I think the tournament style is fine, but maybe you do the tournament style like you did this year, but maybe it's multiple Team USAs versus Team Worlds, or maybe it's just different countries. So like NHL, they have the Four Nations face off right now. Doesn't have anything
So
to do with
good.
the NHL really, but you have top players from Sweden, Finland, Canada, and the US all playing against each other. Do that for the All Star
Yeah.
game. Have all these. Obviously, Greece would kind of be hard. Giannis would kind of have to be pushed into a bubble because where would Giannis go? It's not like, I'm no disrespect, they're not throwing his three other brothers into that mix. Like that would be a train wreck. But I think there definitely could be a tweak around with that. So maybe you do two different, honestly, do two different international teams, two different USA teams, and maybe you make it somewhat similar to this year in the format, but maybe you make the games a little bit longer because there's only the four, and you're just battling it out. Do a little bit round robin
And
with
make it
short
weekend
little
long.
point totals. Weekend long, yes, weekend long, short point, low point totals for the first couple of games because it's round robin play. Once you get out of that, determined seeding, and then you play the tournament on. Boom, all-star game right there, perfect. But
Even if it
yeah,
was like a middle school AAU basketball where the quarters are 10 minutes or 8 minutes, rather than reaching a total score. Yeah, and making it a weekend long, like an AAU tournament, starts on Friday, ends on Sunday night with the championship game, that type of thing. That's what I would love to see.
oh, I completely agree with that. So, needless to say, we have a pretty great idea so far on what the All Star weekend should look like. I think a lot of you viewers would agree with that. And also, I think a lot of you would disagree with that. But I think we
Even
are onto something.
even if it was West A, West B, East A, East B, and there's two teams from each conference, four teams total, battling it out. They all play like twice before the seeding, something like that. I think that'd be cool. I don't love making it four nation style, mainly because then there's so many all-stars and it's kind of taking the aura away from being an NBA all-star because there's just random guys from Greece, random guys from Canada, like on the bench that are an all-star. Like, I don't love that. I want it to go back to West versus East. It's so classic. I also wouldn't mind it just being a regular game, East versus West. Go back to what was so good and everyone loved. Change up the jerseys like they did in the early 2000s, where they wear their jerseys, their own team jerseys, but it's home and away. That was so cool back then. Like, just make the jerseys better, and it's still fun to me. I still loved it because it makes being an all-star have more aura, and that's just great. So just some final thoughts on that. I do have a quote from Cade during All-Star Weekend. Obviously, the players do a lot of media, and a reporter asked Cunningham, "What's the next big goal for Cunningham and his team?" And he said, "Quote, playoffs." Cunningham told reporters, "Quote, 1000% win a playoff series, and then all of the other stuff comes with it. Winning games, get in the playoffs, and win a playoff series." End quote. Ryan, that's exactly what a Detroit Pistons fan wants to hear right now going into the second half of the season. Let's make a push. And if we stay in the sixth seed and Milwaukee's at 7, that's our first round. And you know what, Ryan? I like those odds. So, Ryan, what are some of your thoughts on this quote from Cade Cunningham? It seems to me he's very focused.
Yeah, and honestly, even with the All-Star break, the way they played going into break this year was
Oh,
phenomenal.
man.
It was
Oh,
a
man.
completely different team than last year. Last year, obviously, with Monty Williams, different coaching style and methods. Wink, wink. But going into All-Star break last year, you could tell that the writing was on the walls. The team completely gave up. But then this
Yeah,
year, JB Bickerstaff sitting there going like, I don't care if we're going to break or not. These games are going to end up mattering at the end because we lose them
totally.
now, we're going to have to make them up later. And just that mindset and that standard that he has set since the beginning of the season to now with Trajan Langdon, the whole 9 yards, they are
Mm-hmm.
playing at an ultra high level of basketball. And not only from a fan perspective are they making this very entertaining for us, but they're showing us, okay, this team can actually do some damage. Because
Right.
honestly, you look at the East, the way it's shaping out to be. I mean, like Philly, probably not making the playoffs this
Sucks.
year. They're not going to make it. The way we blew
Man.
them out on national TV, they're not making the playoffs. And if they do, they're on the bubble, making it in, and they're in the play-in. Um, but even if that's the case, they're losing. They're not making it into the playoffs. Um, And as far as the Atlanta Hawks goes, even though they've beaten us on a buzzer beater with Trae Young hitting that three, again, Trae Young is like in the just the bubble of Jalen Brunson. I don't like him because he's just but anyways, the point is Atlanta's not that good of a team. They moved DeAndre Hunter at the deadline, which we both are thinking it was a mistake. They gave a very high-end valued player to the Cavaliers, who are most likely the number one seed in the East, who are probably going to make a deep run this year. So that was a loss. I mean,
For Karis LeVert, by the way.
Yes, yes, Karis LeVert too. Karis LeVert, love him, go blue as always. But like,
not real.
How are you taking Karis LeVert over DeAndre Hunter? I don't know, but it's pointing towards they think that they want to give more of an opportunity to Zachary Rissache because he is just blossoming into a great player. But that's not the point. The point is Atlanta, we can compete with them. The Celtics are probably they're not as competitive. Well, they're competitive, but they're not playing to the level. Probably. Yeah, they're not playing to the level they were playing last year. So it's going to be a little bit different there. But Boston, I think, is a winnable game only if all of our guys are playing at an ultra high level collectively as a group. Like, I'm not talking like first six off the bench. I'm talking whole team. Because if the whole team is going, we're good. But if they're not going, not a great situation. So there's a couple teams here and there within the playoffs, if it were to shape out like it currently is, where I think we really do have a shot. Now, do we have a shot at the championship? Absolutely not. But do we have a shot at making a deep run into the playoffs? Potentially. But the potentially is like, it's like, the potentially is way up here and we're like right about here. So it's not a lot of room there. But I think the way the mindset is going right now, from pre-All-Star break to post-All-Star break, I think we're starting to get into the groove of things.
So after talking through Cade Cunningham's playoffs quote from All-Star Weekend, we got to make sure to talk about this awesome Ausar Thompson quote from All-Star Weekend. He basically did all of his interviews with Amen. He had an interview with Taylor Rooks and a couple other ESPN people and commentators. And obviously Ausar and Amen have very similar playing styles and had kind of weird rookie seasons. Amen had probably a little bit better of a rookie season than Ausar last year, but they have both had breakout seasons and are playing very big roles for their respective teams. And when asked about their differences, Ausar didn't hesitate to take the first shot at Amen by, quote, saying, "I'm cooler," he joked. "I'm just more of a winner. Even at overtime elite days, I won the MVP. We played Amen and we beat him." And so Ausar just going at Amen right away. And Amen comes back by saying, "He's just saying nonsense." Amen responded, "You can look at the NBA wins and see who has more wins," end quote. That makes me a little upset because I am a notorious Rockets hater. The Pistons, through Jalen Green and Cade Cunningham, since they entered the league, have had a pretty big just battles against the Rockets. And now with Amen and Ausar on their respective teams, it kind of adds to the rivalry. But Ryan, it's kind of funny seeing Ausar kind of come out of his shell through the confidence he's gained with his great play and go right at Amen, who's known to be more of a outspoken player, considering his brother Ausar is known to be a little bit more quiet. It's kind of funny. What are some of your thoughts on Amen and how he's playing, and Ausar with his breakout season and really taking over the role of Jaden Ivey?
I think the main reason why Amen gets a little bit more praise is strictly just because of the Rockets timeline. Because last year the Rockets were more relevant than the Pistons. And it was shocking because the Rockets came out of nowhere, signed Fred VanVleet, made a lot of other free agent trades and all that kind of moves. So you look at what they did last year, who they brought in, and then they hire and bring in Ime Udoka. who is a good coach, but obviously had a lot of issues in Boston.
Yeah.
Um, but they make all these moves, and they're in a prime position. Amen comes in, and everybody's kind of more so at the point of the draft. Everybody was higher on Ausar than Amen, and then the Rockets take Amen, obviously, and so from that point on, it just seemed like everybody was like, okay, Amen is the better brother because he went first before Ausar did. And so like it was just this whole thing about, okay, Amen must be the better player if he got picked first. No, the Rockets just wanted more of a point guard than a wing. And they got that. And the Pistons got more of a wing than a point guard because that's what we needed. So I think the draft worked out for both parties. But the misconception is that even though they are twins and quite literally identical twins, it's hard to tell them apart. Even
It
though they
is.
are identical twins, um, they're not the same player at all. They have similar play styles, but they are not the same player. Amen is more of a point guard, like a point wing. Ausar is more of just a wing. Ausar is more of wow, the three is lacking, but he's more of a 3 and D, whereas Amen is more of more of just honestly a point guard, who can he's a little bit more heavy on the shot creation for himself than
Yeah.
others, whereas Ausar is more looking to pass first. He has that pass first mentality. So they're a little bit different here and there. Amen has had his the start to this year and then the start to last year have been great for him. Whereas Ausar last year, again, like we said in even the previous episode, we were saying like, okay, Ausar gave us flashes of what he could do. He never really showed us what he could do. And where he's at right now in the play he's had in year 2 so far, he is starting to come out of his shell a little bit and show us what he can do and not just give us flashes. So in regards to the difference between the two, I think the only true difference that there is just from a fan perspective on the timeline of each franchise. Because they're going, okay, the Rockets are ahead of the Pistons because they have all this talent. They have Alperen Sengun, who's just an all-star. They have Eamon Thompson, who was in the Rising Stars game. They have Fred VanVleet, who is a former all-star, champion with the Raptors. Like, they have all these guys. And so it's just, from a fan perspective, it's that the Rockets are ahead of schedule, whereas the Pistons are slowly trickling back. And so because of that, more often than not, the fans will go, okay, Eamon is better than Ausar. But that's not the case. I don't think it's the case. I think there's a lot of things that Amen does where I'm like, okay, Ausar can't do that. But then there's a lot of things that Ausar does where I'm like sitting there going, okay, Amen can't do that. So it's not necessarily that they're identical outside of just being twins, but their play style is completely different because you have more of a true wing and you more of a point guard that happens to be a wing. So I think the big difference is the timeline between the two franchises and where they are at is why there seems to be this disconnect per se on the talent level between the two, because I think they're actually more close than far apart, but it seems like they're more far apart than close.
As far as statistics wise, they're nearly identical. Right now, Ausar Thompson is averaging 15 points, 6.1 rebounds, 4.4 assists, 2.1 steals per game. Let's keep in mind that's probably better than where Jaden Ivey would be. I think he was hovering around 17 points, so he had the edge in that. Just want to point that out as he's kind of filling the role for Jaden. And then Amen has put up so far 13.3 points per game, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, and 1.6 steals for the Rockets. So there's not a huge difference. The only difference is Amen's got Ausar in assists by averaging 3 more a game, but then there's Ausar averaging 3 more points per game. And then Ausar also has Amen in the steals department. Defensively, Ausar is way more sound than Amen. And so Ausar has really proven that he's going to be a great player in the NBA for many years to come. And that was something at the end of last season that we were a little worried about because we didn't see much improvement over the season. But now knowing that maybe he was just dealing with some health issues, needed a summer just to kind of recoup and work on refining some skills, he's really taken a big leap this season, and it's helped the Pistons tremendously. He was a big part in those big wins against the Bulls, the 76ers, Charlotte. Some of these games we saw previously to the All-Star break, he was a big part and influential in those wins. So it's great to see his play turning into wins. That will do it for episode number 11 of season 3. Make sure to comment below your thoughts on today's episode, whether you're happy with Cade pushing for the playoffs, Ausar Thompson versus Amen. Make sure to comment below who's better, and make sure to like and subscribe. We will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.